Want help to grow your business? Download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.
Hi, welcome to the latest issue of Think Global India edition. In today's show, we're going to be talking about the biggest challenges that you face when doing business in India and how to overcome them. I'm joined today by my friends Mehul and Guru. Welcome, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you, David.
And we're going to start by talking about what the biggest challenges are in terms of doing business in India, and we've got a few examples to share with you. The first one I think is a very common challenge, which is around price, what things cost. I think in the way I see things is that generally anything that comes out of the West is regarded as quite expensive in India, and it creates lots of challenges and misunderstandings. So, Mehul, maybe you could start by giving us an example of where price can be a challenge.
Yeah, to start with, David, if you compare India with any Western country, in the Western country we are more used to having a fixed price system to start with. But unlike that, in India you will find that you will see a variation in the prices when you go out to source your products. So that's the first challenge you will always face. And everyone's up for negotiation, which becomes the second challenge in terms of pricing. And third, by my experience, I feel that a lot of these challenges regarding price is because of the fact that some of the industries aren't as structured as you like them to be, especially as they are in the Western country. To give an example, if I were to talk about property, maybe, if you were to find the price of a property in a particular suburb, say North Sydney or Mosman, for example, you could easily find out the median price of the suburb, and most of the properties would be in the range. But in India, that's not to be. In a particular suburb, you could actually look up a median price, but an actual price of a particular property could be way above or way below. Yeah. So that's one of the challenges you'll find in terms of the price. The second thing is whenever there is a foreign company that comes in or foreign buyer that comes in sourcing for products in India, the expectations from an Indian supplier is that here's a man who's looking for a cheaper product in India, and immediately you could expect an inflated price to be quoted. So for anybody entering into the price market, be aware that this is a price to be negotiated.
And do you have some examples of where maybe somebody had an expectation around price that was totally wrong in the Indian context?
Yes. So I had a situation, in fact it was my own example, because I was sourcing for certain products for some construction that I was to do in Australia actually, and I wanted to buy these products from India, especially the Indian marble, which is perceivably a lot cheaper in India rather than in Australia because it's a local product produced. And when I went in there, because of the variation in price, I could not pick up at the price that I thought I would, and there was a fair deal. In fact, if I added all the transportation costs and freight and insurances, I landed up almost paying the same price that I would have paid if I had bought it from Australia.
Right. So yeah. So that created a discussion around price, I guess, which
absolutely,
which often creates a major challenge, which we'll talk about later in terms of how to overcome that.
Sure.
Guru, anything to add about price?
Yes, David, I think price is a very, very crucial make or break situation in Indian context, purely because India has not been exposed to getting good quality products in the past. So price became a very important consideration, and quality was a subsidiary consideration. So it's very important when you do business with India to overemphasize on the quality and not just focus on the price, because many Indian clients or the companies you deal with will look at purely at the price. I'll give an example. When I was doing business in India, when I was in Africa, I'm doing some business with India. So we had a situation where to source some televisions from China, and this was an Indian buyer. He goes to the Chinese company and says, the Chinese company says, this is the price of the TV product. He says, no, I don't think so. I think I need it cheaper. So let's say, for example, it was $50 for the TV. It was a black and white TV, a small one. He says, I'll give you $30 for the TV. So the Chinese guy says, okay, I'll give you $30. So he gets a product for $30. But on a closer examination, we found out that the Chinese had just substituted the quality of the materials he used.
Right.
And it was very well accepted. The TV lasted 6 months. Well, if he had paid the full price, the TV would have lasted maybe a few years. So again, the consumer is not aware. So the buyer was happy to go with the cheaper price. But from a Western concept, I think people will not compromise on the quality when Westerners do business in India. They will stick to the quality. So it's more of education and ensuring that the Indian buyer is aware that he's getting a quality which lasts longer.
Yeah.
So the consumers are more happy. It's a long-term decision. But again, it's a lot of education to be done in terms of that.
Yeah.
The price is definitely a challenge.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, that's one challenge. Another challenge is around time. I'm sure we've got lots of examples where time blew out or became a lot harder as a challenge than we might have expected. I'm sure you've got good examples of this.
Yeah, timing is something, as I mentioned, it requires incredible patience when you're doing business with India. Things don't happen at the speed at which things are expected to be. A lot of delays in terms of can happen because a lot of business do subcontract their work to outside third parties in India. So if you are a company in the West sourcing a product from India, there is no guarantee that the entire production process will be manufactured by that company. It may be outsourced to some other company or multiple companies. So they are at the mercy of their subcontractors. So there could be issues in that, and if it's not communicated well, so you got to be prepared that something can go around the track and delays can occur. And as I again said, because the legal system is not very foolproof, you don't have much recourse except to just sit back and hope that it gets delivered in time, and you can lose the face with your clients. So definitely you got to ensure that when you are entering into contracts, you got to ensure of very strict timelines in terms of binding them to ensure that whatever third-party contracts or whatever they use are also bound by similar timelines or schedules. It's very important to bind them with this kind of understanding.
Yeah, I mean, time is a very important concept in the Western world. You know, we try and be on time for meetings. When we say we're going to arrive at a certain time, we generally try and stick to that. From my experience, India, not so much so. You know, time is more of a movable thing that could cause some frustration.
Yes, since the time I've been in Australia, and whenever I go back to India for any businesses, and I hold any meetings, I generally tend to be on time because I'm now used to the concept of being on time. And hardly has there been a situation where everybody on the meeting has then come in on time. We eventually land up meeting for at least 30 minutes to an hour before all the participants of the meeting actually turn up.
Right.
Obviously, we have various reasons for being late.
Yeah, the traffic is often one reason, but yes, it's often a reason given whether it applies or not.
Correct, yeah. That's true. And in terms of time, I'd just like to add what Guru told about expectations of time delivery. I'll share an example of mine. I landed up buying a property off the plan in Mumbai. This is years ago, and the property was almost constructed. You could see the last slab being built when I had invested in it. And it just so happened that I got occupation of that property only about 9 years after that. And unlike in Australia, unfortunately, I don't know if things have changed in property now, but unlike in Australia, we don't even have sunset clauses in the agreement.
Right.
So you're just stuck up with investing 50% of the value of the property and then hope that at some stage it will get delivered to you.
Yes.
So
I think we'll come to talk about how to manage and some of the challenges here, but I think time is definitely a big one. Another one is expectations, and a common phrase that I use to people who are thinking about doing business in Asia is double your budget and halve your expectations. And so I'm almost warning everybody up front to say, you know, you'll start with certain expectations. You need to perhaps be a bit more flexible. I'm sure you've got lots of examples of expectations being dashed along the way. Guru, do you want to start?
Me? Okay. Well, I think from my experience in the last couple of years, things have been improving a bit now. People are now more exposed to the Western expectations, and they have realized that if they have to look at a longer horizon in terms of doing business. But yes, it's not across the board. Individually, you can have, you got to be well prepared for a long haul. Never take things for granted in this environment. You got to match your, as you say, the budgets also in terms of what you're going to be forecasting versus what the expectations are. There'll be a huge, maybe a difference. So you got to be prepared to have adequate buffers, as I say, when you do business in India, because there can be anything around the corner, especially because a lot of things are not in the hands of the private sector. It could be a governmental interference, especially in the infrastructure. You might have budgeted for a quoting of a tender, let's say in India, to build a bridge or something, and everything is done based on your research and your calculations. But suddenly there might be an environmental issue which you have not been briefed about, and that can delay your whole project by about a few years, and all your budgets and your things go for a toss, and then you are stuck with the situation where you can't back off. You got to move forward. So you got to ensure that there's a lot of blind corners in this game, and you got to ensure that you got enough buffers whenever doing business, especially in big projects and infrastructure kind of space.
So expect the unexpected.
Yes.
Anything
very
to add
much.
to that, Mehul?
Only an example.
Yeah.
Again, in terms of the marble that I was shipping from India, one of the biggest expectations that happened was, clearly it was new marble which I had imported. I was actually exporting from India, importing to Australia. And I hired a local customs agent to look after the processes before it is shipped out. And again, because of lack of communication or otherwise, or some misunderstanding or lack of his knowledge, we expected that things would flow down quickly and seamlessly, but he transported those goods as used household articles which I owned for more than 2 years. And they came in fresh new packaging, and I found a challenge actually clearing it from the customs at the Australian port, because it was hard to understand how freshly packed items could be 2 years old used household items.
Yeah, yeah, good example. And then another one, which of course we've sort of touched on already, but it comes up in many different forms, is sort of general misunderstandings, which has taken place through the communication process, where somebody's said yes, but maybe they didn't actually mean yes, or somebody's agreed to something when they didn't really necessarily agree, and it causes lots of problems later when everyone realizes that there's been a misunderstanding. I'm sure you come across this all the time, don't you, Mehul?
Yes, and I think this happens more so because India is actually many countries bundled into one, and language becomes one of the biggest challenge whenever we're trying to do business.
Even
Not
when we're
all,
speaking the same language.
actually, which is true in one way. But there are many states in India which don't speak English, although it is generally an English-speaking country. But there are certain states, although Hindi being one of the national languages, there are a couple of states in India which don't even speak Hindi. So where language, which is the key communication medium, becomes a challenge, that's where there are misunderstandings. And most of the times people try and...
To continue enjoying this presentation, download Brin, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit brin.ai or search the App Store today.